After her divorce, her ex-husband and his ruthless lawyers made sure she lost everything. "Nobody wants a homeless woman," he said coldly before walking away with his new lover. With nowhere to go, Jada Beatrice wandered the streets, hungry and heartbroken, until one night she was digging through trash behind a cafe. That's when a woman in an elegant black coat stopped beside her and asked softly, "Excuse me, are you Jada Beatrice?" Shocked, she nodded. The woman smiled kindly. "Your mother just passed away. She left you her mansion, her Ferrari, and her $500 million estate." Jada froze, tears filling her eyes. Her mother's words echoed painfully in her mind. "Don't marry that man, Jada. He's a cheater. One day he'll betray you. If you marry him, you'll get nothing." But Jada had been blinded by love and defied her mother's warning, sacrificing everything for a man who proved her mother right. Now, standing in the cold night, her heart trembling, the woman added quietly, "There's one condition." And what she said next changed everything. "Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. If you skip this story, I worked too much on it, and I will stop writing because I think I am getting old, and my words aren't making a place in your hearts, because I can't sleep at night when I see my family losing trust in me. Still, I say God bless my beautiful sisters, because today I have a family of 42,000 people only because of you. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write. I am with Mr. Peter. Your mother wanted you to remember what you're worth before you spend a single dollar of her money." The words hung in the cold night air like frozen breath. Jada Beatrice looked up from the trash bin behind the cafe, her fingers still wrapped around a discarded sandwich that someone had barely touched. The woman speaking wore a coat that whispered of wealth, black cashmere, perfectly tailored, the kind of garment Jada had once worn without thought. Now it seemed impossible that she'd ever lived in that world. "I don't know you," Jada said, her voice raw from days without speaking to anyone who looked at her as human. "But I knew your mother intimately. My name is Evangeline Hartwell. I served as her attorney for the past 15 years. The woman's face held no pity, only something that looked like respect. "Your mother, Eleanor Beatrice, passed away 8 days ago. Her final instructions were explicit. I was to find you personally, wherever you were, and deliver her message face to face." The sandwich tumbled from Jada's hands. She gripped the metal edge of the trash bin, feeling the cold bite into her palms. "My mother is dead? I wish I could have found you sooner. She held on longer than the doctors predicted, kept asking if I'd located you yet. She wanted to see you one more time, but I wouldn't come. I wouldn't answer her calls. I chose him over her, and now she's gone, and I never—" The words choked off. Jada felt her legs buckle, and suddenly she was on the pavement, the concrete rough against her knees. Years of held-back grief erupted from somewhere deep in her chest, sounds that didn't seem human coming from her throat. Evangeline knelt beside her, heedless of the filth on the ground. She didn't reach out to touch Jada, didn't offer false comfort. She simply waited, present and patient, until the worst of the storm passed. When Jada could finally breathe again, Evangeline spoke quietly. "Your mother understood why you stayed away. She knew what he did to you, how he twisted everything until you couldn't see straight. That's precisely why she did what she did." Jada wiped her face with trembling hands. "What are you talking about? Eleanor left you her entire estate, the mansion on Laurel Heights where you grew up, the Ferrari she bought to celebrate Beatrice Couture's first major success, her personal fortune, her investments, her legacy." Evangeline paused, letting the words settle. "Conservative estimates value everything at $500 million. The number was absurd." Jada stared at this elegant stranger, trying to process what she was hearing. She was sitting in an alley, wearing clothes she'd been wearing for weeks, and this woman was telling her she was rich. She said if I married him, I'd get nothing. She made me choose. She said that hoping fear would wake you up when love couldn't. When you married him anyway, she didn't stop loving you. She simply started planning for the day you'd find your way back. Evangeline stood, offering her hand. But there are conditions attached to the inheritance. Significant ones. We need to discuss them somewhere warm. My car is just there. Inside the vehicle, heat enveloped Jada like an embrace from another life. Evangeline handed her water and a thick envelope embossed with her mother's initials. The conditions are not negotiable, Evangeline began. First, you must return to the world your mother built. Not just physically inhabit her home, but truly return. Beatrice Couture has been failing since you left. You have 1 year to restore the company to profitability and creative relevance. Jada's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside were photographs of the mansion, the design studios, the gardens where she'd spent countless afternoons with her mother, learning to see beauty in every detail. The second condition is more complex, Evangeline continued, her voice taking on an edge. The Kin family has been systematically attempting to destroy the historic district surrounding your mother's estate. Asher's development company wants to demolish dozens of homes, beautiful, irreplaceable buildings, to construct generic luxury towers. Your mother spent her final years fighting to preserve that neighborhood. She wants you to finish the fight. Hearing his name was like being struck. Asher is trying to tear down my mother's neighborhood. He began the acquisition process shortly after your divorce. Some believe it was strategic, attacking what your mother loved most, punishing her for trying to protect you from him. Rage flooded through Jada's body, hot and clarifying. All those years defending him, believing his version of reality, letting him convince her that her mother was controlling and unreasonable. And while she'd been isolated and manipulated, he'd been planning revenge against an elderly woman whose only crime was loving her daughter. If I meet these conditions, the estate becomes mine. If you fail, everything goes to charity. Your mother was adamant. She said you needed more than money. You needed purpose. You needed to remember who you were before he systematically erased that person. Jada stared at the photographs. On the back of one, her mother had written in her familiar hand, "For my daughter who forgot she was a queen. Come home. When can I start?" Evangeline's smile was genuine. Right now. The staff has been maintaining the mansion, waiting for your return. They never stopped believing you'd come back. The drive through the city felt dreamlike. Jada watched neighborhoods transform from desperate to prosperous, each block bringing back memories of walks with her mother, conversations about art and legacy. Dreams they'd built together before everything shattered. The mansion appeared like something from a fairy tale, every window glowing, the facade beautiful and impossibly familiar. As Evangeline's car stopped in the circular driveway, the front door opened and people emerged. Delphine reached her first. The housekeeper, who'd been with their family since Jada was an infant, pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Child, oh child, I thought I'd lost you forever. Welcome home." Laurent, the estate manager, stood with his usual dignified composure, but tears tracked down his weathered face. "Miss Beatrice, your mother never stopped preparing for this moment. Everything is ready." Then a younger woman stepped forward, her expression guarded. "I'm Imani, your cousin. We met a few times when I was younger before you left." Jada remembered vaguely, a teenager with stars in her eyes, talking about fashion school and following in Eleanor's footsteps. Now she was a woman, and the stars had been replaced with something harder. "I've been managing what remains of Beatrice Couture," Imani said, her tone professional but distant. "We should meet tomorrow morning. You need to understand exactly how dire the situation is before you make any promises about saving the company." She turned and walked back into the house without waiting for a response. "Don't take it personally," Delphine whispered. "She's been carrying enormous weight, trying to preserve your mother's dream while grieving. She'll come around." Evangeline handed Jada an ornate key. "This house is yours now. I'll return tomorrow to discuss the legal requirements in detail. Tonight, just rest. Your mother left letters throughout the house. Find them when you're ready." After everyone else retreated, Jada stood alone in the grand foyer. Marble floors gleamed. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light. Original paintings, many by her mother's artist friends, lined the walls. Nothing had changed. Her mother had preserved everything, as if maintaining a museum dedicated to the hope that her daughter would return. Delphine appeared with gentle insistence, guiding Jada upstairs to her old bedroom. It was exactly as she'd left it, down to the book on the nightstand. But on the bed lay fresh clothes and a note in her mother's handwriting. "My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone, but you're home. That's all I ever wanted. Don't waste time on guilt or regret, just live. Be the woman I always knew you were beneath all his lies. The conditions I've set aren't punishment. They're your map back to yourself. I love you beyond words. Always have. Always will, Mama." Jada held the note against her chest and wept. Not the harsh, breaking sobs from the alley, but quieter tears of understanding. Her mother had loved her enough to let her fall completely, knowing it was the only way she'd learn to rise. She stood under the shower for what felt like hours, watching filth and shame spiral down the drain. The towels were impossibly soft. The clothes fit perfectly. In the mirror, she barely recognized the gaunt woman staring back, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Determination. Unable to sleep, she wandered the mansion in darkness. Each room held memories. The music room where her mother had hosted charity concerts. The library where they'd spent rainy afternoons reading. The dining room where family gatherings had once filled the space with laughter. In her mother's study, she found a wall covered in photographs documenting her entire life. Birthday parties, school graduations, her first fashion show in high school. But one photograph was recent. Taken from a distance, it showed Jada sitting outside a shelter, her face hollow but her posture unbowed. Her mother had known where she was, had been watching over her even when Jada had refused all contact. Beneath the photo lay a document in Evangeline's precise script, but the words were her mother's voice captured in legal language. "My daughter believed I abandoned her when I gave her an ultimatum. She thought love meant accepting her choices, even when those choices destroyed her. But true love is standing at the exit with water and bandages, waiting for someone to walk out of the fire. I waited, Jada. I never stopped waiting. I prepared everything you'd need to rise again. Not because I wanted to control your life, but because I knew who you really were beneath all his carefully constructed lies. Come back to yourself. That's all I'm asking." Jada was still holding the document when her phone, charged for the first time in weeks, buzzed with a message. "Unknown number. Heard about your good fortune. Congratulations. Remember what I told you when we divorced? That support I gave you during our marriage has value. We built our life together, and I expect fair compensation for my contributions. My lawyer will be in touch soon. Let's handle this maturely. Asher." Her hands trembled with rage. He couldn't even allow her one night of peace. One night to grieve her mother without his poison seeping in. Another notification appeared. An email this time. Official legal letterhead, making it look important and intimidating. Notice of legal action. Kinvey versus Beatrice Estate. Mr. Asher Kinv is filing suit seeking rightful compensation from the inheritance received by his former spouse, Jada Beatrice. Claim: Mr. Kinv provided substantial support during their marriage, entitling him to 50% of all inherited assets. Initial hearing has been scheduled. Immediate legal representation is strongly advised. Jada sat in her mother's chair, surrounded by evidence of love and legacy, staring at threats from a man who had already taken so much. But something was different now. She wasn't the broken woman he'd thrown away. She was Eleanor Beatrice's daughter, sitting in Eleanor Beatrice's home, surrounded by Eleanor Beatrice's strength. She called Evangeline, unconcerned about the late hour. "I need you to tell me everything about the legal team my mother assembled. Because Asher Kinv just declared war. And this time, I'm not defenseless. This time I fight back." Chapter 2. The Devil Wears Deposition's morning came too quickly. Jada dressed carefully in another of her mother's suits, feeling the weight of legacy in every seam. The courtroom awaited, and with it the first real battle. The courthouse steps were lined with photographers, their cameras a gauntlet she had to walk through. Someone shouted a question about abandoning her dying mother. Another asked if she felt guilty taking money she hadn't earned. Evangeline moved through them like a shield, deflecting with professional grace, but Jada saw him before they reached the doors. Asher stood at the top of the steps with Simone, his arm possessive around her waist, both of them dressed like they were attending a society function rather than a legal proceeding. He wanted Jada to see them, to remember her replacement, to feel small. Instead, she felt nothing. The man who had once consumed her entire world now seemed impossibly distant, like a photograph of someone she'd known in another life. Simone's eyes met hers for a brief moment. Was that guilt, sympathy? Whatever it was disappeared as Asher pulled her closer, performing for the cameras. Inside the courtroom, Jada took her seat beside Evangeline. Across the aisle, Asher's legal team arranged themselves with military precision. 3 attorneys, all expensive suits and careful expressions, preparing for systematic destruction. Then he entered. Tobias Sheffield moved through the courtroom with the confidence of someone who'd never lost. Silver threaded his dark hair. His eyes assessed everything with surgical precision. When he placed his briefcase down and finally looked at Jada, his expression revealed nothing. No sympathy, no acknowledgement of her humanity. She was simply a problem to be solved. Judge Patricia Holloway entered, and the room rose as one. Mr. Sheffield, present your opening argument. Tobias stood, and when he spoke, every word was calculated for maximum impact. Your Honor, this case centers on a simple principle of fairness. My client devoted years to supporting his then-wife during a period when she had completely severed ties with her family. He provided shelter, financial support, emotional stability. He stood by her when her own mother refused to help. Jada's jaw tightened. Evangeline's hand found hers under the table, steadying. The defendant now benefits from an inheritance worth hundreds of millions, wealth she did nothing to earn. Meanwhile, my client, who actually supported her through genuine hardship, receives nothing. We're not seeking charity. We're seeking recognition that marriage is a partnership, and sacrifices made during that partnership deserve acknowledgement. He sat down, and Jada realized she'd stopped breathing. He'd made Asher sound noble, made her sound like an opportunist. Worse, he'd done it so smoothly that doubt crept in, even knowing the truth. Evangeline rose with quiet authority. Your Honor, Mr. Sheffield presents compelling fiction. Let me offer facts. Jada Beatrice didn't sever ties with her mother through indifference. She was systematically isolated by a controlling spouse who recognized that her mother represented the one voice of reason that might help her see reality. She moved toward the judge, commanding attention without demanding it. Mrs. Eleanor Beatrice didn't refuse to help her daughter. She refused to enable an abusive relationship by providing resources that would be controlled by Mr. Kinvey. It was an act of desperate love, not abandonment. The moment Mr. Kinv divorced the defendant, taking everything they'd accumulated, leaving her literally homeless, her mother began preparations for her daughter's inevitable return. Evangeline placed a document before the judge. This letter, written by the deceased immediately after the divorce, establishes the inheritance conditions. Mrs. Beatrice explicitly states she structured her estate to give her daughter not just money, but the opportunity to rebuild her self-worth. She understood her daughter would need more than financial support. Judge Holloway examined the document carefully. As for Mr. Kinv's so-called support, Evangeline continued, steel entering her voice, we will demonstrate that he systematically controlled the defendant's access to all resources, isolated her from employment opportunities, and weaponized financial dependence as a tool of psychological abuse. Support and control are not synonymous. The judge looked between both attorneys. Mr. Sheffield, you're requesting immediate depositions. Yes, Your Honor. We believe the defendant's household staff and business associates can illuminate the true nature of the relationship between mother and daughter, which is directly relevant to determining whether this inheritance is appropriate. Objection, Evangeline said firmly. Whether the defendant deserves her inheritance is not a legal question before this court. Mrs. Beatrice had absolute right to leave her estate to whomever she chose, under whatever conditions she wished. The court will allow limited depositions, Holloway ruled. But Mr. Sheffield, restrict your questions to the marriage and the support your client claims to have provided. This will not become an inquisition of a deceased woman's choices. Understood? Perfectly, Your Honor. As the hearing concluded, Tobias passed Jada's table. His stride slowed almost imperceptibly, and for one moment their eyes met. Something flickered in his expression. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition that she was more than a case file. Then it was gone, and he continued walking. Outside, Asher performed for the media. I loved my ex-wife deeply. I still care about her well-being. This isn't revenge, it's about principle. About recognizing that when you support someone through their darkest moments, that commitment deserves respect. Jada wanted to scream the truth about his rage, his control, the deliberate destruction of her sense of self. But Evangeline's hand on her arm reminded her that emotional outbursts would only validate his narrative of her instability. Back at the mansion, Laurent had prepared tea in the conservatory. Delphine hovered nearby, maternal concern radiating from her, until Evangeline gently suggested they needed privacy. The depositions will be brutal, Evangeline warned once they were alone. He's going to question everyone who loves you, and he's exceptionally skilled at making loyalty appear suspicious. Delphine, Laurent, Imani, they'll all face intense interrogation about your mother's choices, your relationship with her, every painful detail. I know. Jada stared into her teacup. He's going to try to prove I'm unworthy, that I abandoned my mother for him, then crawled back only when money entered the picture. Yes, we need to prepare for how devastating that will feel. These people have protected you, waited for your return. No, they'll be forced to relive your absence, while a hostile attorney twists their words. Jada stood, moving to the windows overlooking gardens her mother had spent decades perfecting. Every plant, every stone pathway, every fountain, all chosen with love and care. My mother gave me 1 year to save her company and stop Ash's development. But he won't allow me that year. He'll drag this litigation out, tie up the estate, make meeting her conditions impossible. That appears to be his strategy, yes. Then we move faster. I need to see Imani immediately, understand exactly what I'm facing with Beatrice Couture. I need to meet whoever's been fighting the development. I need to start rebuilding while he's focused on destroying me in court. Evangeline smiled slightly. Your mother would be extremely proud. That's precisely the response she hoped for. Late that night, unable to find sleep, Jada wandered into her mother's bedroom. She'd been avoiding this room, but grief and exhaustion finally drew her there. Everything remained untouched. Perfume bottles on the vanity still held her mother's scent. A book lay open on the nightstand. Slippers waited beside the bed as if their owner would return any moment. On the desk sat a stack of letters tied with faded ribbon, all addressed to Jada, none ever mailed. She sat down and began reading, one after another. Her mother had written regularly, documenting everything, her illness progression, the neighborhood fight, Beatrice Couture's slow decline, and beneath it all, endless love for an absent daughter. I saw you today, my darling. You didn't see me, but I was there. You were outside that shelter on Maple Street, looking so tired and lost. Everything in me wanted to run to you, to bring you home immediately. But I know you're not ready yet. He has to finish destroying the illusion before you can see truth clearly. It's killing me to wait, but I promised myself I'd wait. Come back when you're ready. I'll be here. I'll always be here. The date placed this letter just weeks before her mother's death. She'd been dying, watching her daughter suffer from a distance, waiting with the patience of someone who understood that some lessons couldn't be taught, only learned through pain. Jada pressed the letters against her heart and let herself cry, not the desperate sobs of the alley, but quiet tears of understanding. Her mother had loved her enough to watch her fall, knowing it was the only path to eventual rising. A sound at the door made her look up. Imani stood in the doorway, her expression complicated. Delphine mentioned you were awake. I couldn't sleep either. She hesitated. May I come in? It was your aunt's room. You have every right. Imani entered but didn't sit. That's not true. She was your mother. This was always your home. I was just the cousin who tried to hold things together while you were gone. I'm sorry, Jada said. The words inadequate but necessary. For leaving, for abandoning everyone, for choosing him over everything that mattered. Don't apologize yet. Imani's voice carried sharp edges. You don't get to come back and say sorry and have everything be forgiven immediately. Your mother spent years trying to salvage what you left behind. Years, Jada. While you were with him, she was fighting to preserve your legacy. She died still fighting, still hoping you'd return. The truth landed like blows. You're absolutely right. But Imani continued, her voice softening fractionally. She also spent those years planning for you. Everything she did was for you. The conditions in her will. We discussed them extensively. She wanted to ensure that if you came back, you'd have to really come back. Not just physically, but as yourself again. I don't even know who that is anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. Because tomorrow morning, I'm showing you exactly how dire things are at Beatrice Couture. It's going to hurt. But if we're going to save it, you need to see the truth. After Imani left, Jada returned to her room, but sleep remained elusive. She pulled out her old sketch pad from the closet and began drawing for the first time in years. Her hand moved awkwardly at first, muscles unused to the motion, but gradually the lines began to flow. She sketched a dress. Strong architectural lines, not delicate or pretty but powerful. A dress for a woman going to war. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Against every instinct screaming caution, she opened the message. I hope you understand this doesn't have to be adversarial. We had meaningful years together, Jada. I'm not trying to hurt you. I simply want what's fair. Call off your attorney and let's discuss this reasonably like adults. There's no need for this to become ugly. TSTS Tobias Sheffield. Her opponent's attorney was contacting her directly, violating every ethical boundary. She should immediately report this to Evangeline. Instead, she found herself staring at the message, analyzing every word. I hope you understand, and I'm not trying to hurt you, phrasing that suggested personal investment beyond professional obligation. She deleted the message without responding. But she didn't forget it. Something in his tone implied Tobias Sheffield wasn't as convinced of his client's righteousness as his courtroom performance suggested. And if he had doubts, that meant somewhere in all this there might be a crack she could exploit, not in Tobias himself necessarily, but in the absolute certainty of Asher's case. She finally fell asleep as dawn painted the sky, her sketch pad beside her filled with designs for dresses that looked like armor. Tomorrow would bring depositions, the systematic destruction of everyone she loved, all their pain exposed and weaponized. But she'd survived worse than words. She'd survived Asher himself, and she was done being afraid. Chapter 3, Blood and Silk, the deposition room, felt deliberately designed for psychological warfare. Windowless, with fluorescent lights that cast everyone in sickly pallor, the space seemed engineered to drain hope. Delphine sat across from Tobias Sheffield, her hands folded with the dignity of someone who'd served distinguished families her entire life. But Jada could see the tremor in those fingers. Mrs. Delphine Rousseau, Tobias began, his voice carrying false gentleness that made it more dangerous. You've worked for the Beatrice family for how long? I came to work for Miss Eleanor when Jada was just an infant. I've been with them ever since. So you witnessed Jada's entire life, her childhood, adolescence, her decision to marry my client? Yes. And you were present for the deterioration of the relationship between Jada and her mother. Delphine's spine straightened. I witnessed a young woman fall in love with the wrong man, and I watched her mother try desperately to protect her. Please just answer the question directly. Mrs. Rousseau. Tobias's politeness somehow made the correction more cutting. Did you witness conflict between mother and daughter regarding the marriage? Eleanor tried to protect her daughter from a dangerous situation. Any mother would, by threatening complete disinheritance, by refusing to enable circumstances that were destroying her child. Tobias made a note, his pen scratching across paper with finality. Did Jada attempt to contact her mother during the marriage years? Not that I'm aware of. Not once. No phone calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation over all those years. Delphine's composure finally fractured. Tears spilled down her weathered cheeks, and her voice broke. She tried at first. She called constantly. She wrote heartbreaking letters. But Eleanor refused to accept them as long as that man was in the picture. It nearly destroyed her to turn her daughter away. But she believed, she had to believe, it was the only way to make Jada see what was really happening to her. So Eleanor Beatrice deliberately severed all communication with her own daughter. She deliberately refused to watch her daughter be systematically destroyed while pretending everything was fine. How did Eleanor react when she learned about the divorce? The question seemed to shatter something inside Delphine. Her entire body shook as she spoke. She was hospitalized at the time, already gravely ill. When she found out Jada had been discarded with nothing, literally homeless, she discharged herself against every doctor's order. She came home and immediately started planning, day and night, obsessively planning how to bring Jada back, how to protect her, how to give her reasons to keep living. She worked herself into absolute exhaustion, setting up those inheritance conditions. She died planning for her daughter's future. Jada couldn't watch anymore. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly, and fled the room. Evangeline followed her into the hallway, where Jada pressed her forehead against the cold wall, trying to remember how to breathe. "I killed her," Jada whispered. "My stubbornness, my blindness, I killed my mother. No!" Evangeline's voice was iron. "Your mother's illness killed her. You didn't cause it, and this is exactly what they want. For you to drown in guilt so completely that you can't fight effectively. How can I sit there and listen to them dissect what I did to her? Because that's what it takes to win. That's what your mother knew you'd have to face. Every truth, every failure, every consequence, and choose to fight anyway." They returned to the room as Laurent's deposition began. The estate manager sat with perfect posture, his expression revealing nothing. But Jada recognized the grief beneath his composure. Tobias treated him with more respect, perhaps recognizing a fellow professional. "Mr. Laurent Beaumont, you managed Eleanor Beatrice's personal affairs and estate." "I did." "Describe the financial state of the estate during Jada's absence." Laurent's voice remained measured. "Miss Eleanor made numerous financial decisions that prioritized keeping Beatrice Couture operational over her personal comfort or security. She took substantial loans against the mansion. She sold personal assets of significant sentimental value. She even diverted funds from her own medical care to maintain company payroll. Why would she make such choices? Because that company was her daughter's legacy. She believed with absolute certainty that Jada would return someday and would need something meaningful to return to. She was building a bridge back home. Did Eleanor ever express anger toward her daughter for abandoning her? No. Laurent's answer was immediate and firm. She expressed grief that cut to the bone. She expressed worry that kept her awake nights. She expressed desperate, unconditional love, but never anger. She said repeatedly that Jada was under a spell, that she'd wake up eventually, and when that happened, everything needed to be ready and waiting. Tobias paused, something flickering across his face that might have been doubt. "Did you ever meet Asherkin personally?" "Once. He appeared at the mansion shortly after the marriage, demanding to see Eleanor. She refused to receive him. He became verbally aggressive with the staff, making threats, his rage barely controlled. I had him physically removed from the property." What was the nature of his threats? He accused Eleanor of alienating his wife from him, of interfering in their marriage. He said he would make absolutely sure she regretted trying to come between them. He was particularly furious that Eleanor had closed the trust fund Jada previously had access to. There was a trust fund? Tobias looked genuinely surprised, as if this detail had been deliberately withheld from his briefing. Yes, a substantial one established when Jada was born. Eleanor closed it the day after the wedding because she'd received information that Mr. Kinv had already attempted to access it, claiming he needed to properly manage his wife's finances for her protection. Eleanor said she'd rather burn every dollar than let him touch it. One of Asher's other attorneys objected, trying to suppress this testimony as irrelevant. But Tobias overruled his own colleague, clearly wanting this information on record. Jada watched him carefully. He was supposed to be destroying her witnesses, but instead he was uncovering truths that damaged his client's narrative. When Imani's turn came, the tension in the room became suffocating. She sat down with barely controlled fury, someone who'd been waiting for this opportunity. Tobias seemed to sense the danger. "Miss Imani Chambers, you're the defendant's cousin and have been managing Beatrice Couture. What little remains of it, yes. Describe the company's current condition." "Devastated. We've lost every major account, our most talented designers, our entire reputation for reliability. We're surviving on small commissions and the loyalty of a handful of long-time clients who remember what we used to be." "When did this decline begin?" Imani looked directly at Asher, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "Approximately 1 year after Jada married him. Our suppliers suddenly started refusing to work with us. Our clients became mysteriously unavailable. Applications for standard loans were inexplicably denied. We later discovered, through considerable investigation, that someone had been actively, deliberately sabotaging every relationship we had." "You're making serious accusations. Do you have evidence?" "I have testimonies from multiple suppliers who were contacted by representatives from Kinvey Enterprises, offering them substantially more favorable terms if they immediately stopped doing business with us. I've recovered emails from former clients who admitted, some reluctantly, some angrily, that they were pressured to drop us. I have a documented paper trail of deliberate interference that corresponds exactly with Jada's marriage to your client." Tobias went very still. "You're directly accusing my client of deliberately destroying Beatrice Couture?" "I'm not accusing. I'm stating documented facts. Asher Kinv saw Jada's family as an obstacle to complete control over her. He wanted her absolutely dependent on him, so he systematically set out to ensure she'd have nothing, no family business, no legacy, no refuge to return to if she ever tried to leave. He attempted to erase her entire family's legacy while he was erasing her sense of self. These are extremely serious allegations. Then perhaps you should ask your client about them directly." Imani's voice carried years of watching. "Her aunt died trying to save what one man had tried to destroy. Ask him why Eleanor Beatrice spent her final years fighting endless legal battles against his development plans. Ask him why he dramatically accelerated those plans immediately after divorcing. Jada, ask him why he's demanding money from an inheritance. He spent years actively trying to prevent Jada from ever receiving. The deposition ended in chaos. Asher's attorneys demanded all of Imani's evidence be excluded as inflammatory and prejudicial. Evangeline argued it was directly relevant to determining whether Asher had truly supported Jada or had systematically destroyed her every option for independence. Judge Holloway would rule later, but damage had been done. A new narrative had emerged, one painting Asher not as a supportive spouse, but as a calculating predator who'd hunted his prey with patient precision. That night at the mansion, Jada found herself in the design studio. Her mother's sketches surrounded her, decades of creativity and vision, preserved in pencil and paper. She began sorting through them, and patterns she'd never noticed before emerged. Each collection had an overarching theme, but underneath, every single piece was individually named. Not with typical fashion names like Midnight Elegance or Summer Dreams, but with moments from Jada's life, Jada's first steps. Summer in the garden, teaching my daughter to dream. Every garment her mother had ever designed was a love letter to her daughter. Imani found her hours later, surrounded by papers, tears streaming down Jada's face. "She never stopped loving me," Jada whispered. "Every piece, every design, it was all for me. Even when I wasn't here, when I'd chosen him over her, she was still creating for me." Imani knelt beside her, picking up a sketch. "This one's from the year after you left. The collection was called Absence and Longing. Critics loved it, called it Eleanor's most emotionally powerful work. They had no idea she was literally designing her grief, putting her pain into every seam. How do I possibly make this right? You can't undo the past or bring back lost time. But you can honor it by fighting for what she built. By being the daughter she always believed you were, underneath all of Asher's careful manipulation." They worked through the night, Imani teaching Jada everything about running the company, the clients they'd lost, and the loyal few who'd remained, the financial precipice they balanced on. It was worse than Jada had imagined. Without immediate influx of both capital and new clients, Beatrice Couture would collapse completely within months. "Why did you stay?" Jada asked as dawn approached. "You could have let it die, started fresh somewhere else with your own vision. Why keep fighting for something that wasn't even yours?" "Because it mattered to her more than her own life. Because she asked me personally to protect it until you came home. Because some legacies are worth dying for, and she proved that by literally working herself to death, trying to save this for you." Imani stood, stretching. "Besides, I'm not doing this just for Eleanor, or even for you. I'm doing it because Asher Kinv tried to destroy something beautiful out of pure spite, and I'll be damned if I let that kind of evil win." A knock at the studio door interrupted them. Delphine entered, carrying coffee and pastries, but her expression was troubled. "Miss Jada, there's someone at the door. She says her name is Octavia Beaumont. She claims she was Eleanor's closest friend and needs to speak with you. Urgently." The name sent electricity through. Jada. Octavia Beaumont was legendary, a philanthropist who moved in the highest circles, whose opinion could make or break reputations in their world. Her mother had spoken of her often with deep affection, but Jada had never actually met her. "Should I send her away?" Delphine asked gently. "No." Jada stood, suddenly aware of how she must look after a sleepless night, surrounded by sketches and tears. "If she was my mother's friend, I absolutely need to hear what she has to say." Octavia Beaumont swept into the studio like a force of nature. Silver-haired, Rigul, wearing her considerable power like the finest couture. Her eyes swept over Jada with an assessing gaze that was calculating, but not unkind, finally softening with something that looked like recognition. "You look just like her," Octavia said quietly. "Like Eleanor when we were young and absolutely certain we could change the world with good design and fierce determination. Mrs. Beaumont, It's Octavia, child. Your mother and I abandoned formality decades ago." She moved to the window, looking out over gardens Eleanor had cultivated with such care. "Eleanor called me the week before she died. She told me everything about the conditions in her will, about her hopes for you, about the fight you'd be facing. She asked me to watch over you if I could, to help if you'd accept it. I don't deserve anyone's help. I abandoned her when she needed me most. You were manipulated by a skilled predator who recognized that your greatest strength, your enormous capacity for love and loyalty, could be weaponized against you." Eleanor understood that completely. She didn't blame you. "Neither do I." Octavia turned back, her expression hardening into something formidable. "But now we have serious work to do. Asher Kinv and his entire family have been a blight on this community for far too long. His father was a corrupt judge who helped his son build a corrupt empire. His mother sits on charity boards and uses that influence to punish anyone who opposes their interests. His sister controls media narratives through her platform. You know them well." "Know them? I've been actively fighting them for years. They've tried to bulldoze 3 other historic neighborhoods to build their empty monuments to excess. Eleanor and I stood together against them every single time. Now Eleanor's gone, and you're the one standing in their way." Octavia placed a thick file on the table. This contains everything I know about the Keen family's activities over the past decade. Evidence of bribery, manipulation, financial impropriety. Some of it's legally actionable. Some of it's just truth that wealthy families don't want exposed. Use it wisely. Why are you giving this to me? Because Eleanor was my dearest friend for over 40 years. Because I watched her heart break over losing you. Because I held her hand when she died, and her very last words were about you. Tell my daughter she's stronger than she knows. Tell her to fight, so I'm telling you. Fight, Jada. Fight with absolutely everything you have. After Octavia left, Jada opened the file. Page after page of meticulously documented corruption, each piece of evidence carefully sourced and verified. Octavia hadn't just been Eleanor's friend, she'd been her ally in war. Jada's phone rang, shattering the moment. Evangeline's voice carried urgent tension. We have a serious problem. Ash's team has filed an emergency motion to freeze your entire inheritance pending case outcome. They're arguing you can't be trusted with the assets while allegations about your abandonment are being investigated. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? That's not nearly enough time to prepare properly. I know. They're deliberately trying to catch us off balance and overwhelmed. If they succeed, you won't be able to access funds to run Beatrice Couture or fight the development plans. You'll lose by procedural default. Jada looked at the file Octavia had given her, at her mother's sketches surrounding her, at Imani, watching with a mixture of challenge and hope in her eyes. Then we'd better work extremely fast, she said, her voice carrying a strength she hadn't known she still possessed. Because I'm not losing. Not to him. Not to his family. Not ever again. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Lies. The emergency hearing arrived with brutal speed. Jada had barely slept, spending the entire night with Evangeline and Soren Whitlock, the legendary attorney her mother had retained, a man whose snow-white hair and penetrating eyes suggested he'd seen every legal maneuver ever invented and had counter-moves for all of them. They're going straight for your throat, Soren said, his voice gravelly but sharp. Freezing your assets would make it impossible to meet your inheritance conditions. You'd lose everything through procedural warfare alone. It's vicious, but I'll admit it's elegant. Can we stop it? Depends entirely on Judge Holloway. She's fair, but extremely cautious. If they present sufficient concern about your mental stability following months of homelessness, she might grant a temporary freeze pending full evaluation. Evaluation? Jada's stomach dropped sickeningly. Evangeline's hand found hers. It's mentioned specifically in their motion. They're suggesting you're not mentally fit to manage this level of wealth given your recent trauma. It's deeply offensive, but it's also strategically brilliant. So they're going to have me declared incompetent. They're going to try their absolute best. Soren's voice turned to steel. Which is why we're going to show the court exactly how competent you are. You've been home less than 2 weeks, and you're already rebuilding Beatrice Couture, working with community leaders on preservation efforts, managing an enormously complex estate. That's not incompetence, that's exceptional resilience under impossible circumstances. The courtroom was packed with media when they arrived. Asher sat with his new attorney. Tobias was notably, conspicuously absent. The replacement was someone Soren recognized immediately, his expression darkening with genuine concern. Evander Cross, he muttered quietly. They brought in a specialist. This is going to be extremely ugly. Cross stood to present the motion, and Jada immediately understood Soren's concern. Where Tobias had been precise and coldly professional, Cross was theatrical, performative, and deliberately cruel in ways that appeared benevolent. Your Honor, we're not here to attack Miss Beatrice. We're here out of genuine concern for her well-being and safety. A woman who spent months homeless, literally scavenging for food from trash bins, exposed to elements and the profound psychological trauma that entails, cannot possibly be expected to suddenly manage an estate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It would be profoundly irresponsible to allow it without proper safeguards. He produced photographs that made Jada's breath catch painfully. Images of her during those awful months, sitting outside shelters looking hollow, digging through trash, sleeping on benches, her face gaunt and her eyes empty. Someone had been following her, documenting her lowest moments. These images show a woman in severe crisis, a woman who desperately needs help, not the crushing burden of enormous financial responsibility. My client, Mr. Kinv, is actually trying to protect his ex-wife by asking this court to ensure she receives proper evaluation and support before taking on such overwhelming demands. The narrative was brilliant in its calculated cruelty, making Asher appear concerned and protective, making Jada appear fragile and incapable, making the inheritance look like a burden rather than her birthright and salvation. Evangeline stood, fury barely controlled beneath professional composure. Your Honor, Mr. Cross has very conveniently omitted the reason Miss Beatrice was in those devastating situations. His client divorced her and deliberately left her completely destitute, taking every single asset they'd accumulated together. He didn't show any concern then. This sudden worry for her mental health is transparent manipulation. The past relationship dynamics are not relevant to current mental competency assessment. Cross countered smoothly, as if he'd anticipated this exact response. Judge Holloway looked troubled, clearly torn. Miss Beatrice, I'd like to hear directly from you. How do you respond to these concerns about your ability to manage your inheritance? Jada stood, her legs shaking, but her voice finding steadiness. Your Honor, I won't pretend those months weren't absolutely devastating. They were. I lost everything, my home, my dignity, my entire sense of self. But I never lost my sanity or my will to survive. The moment I had resources again, I immediately began productive, meaningful work. I'm not asking to be given anything I can't handle. I'm asking to be allowed to fulfill my mother's final wishes. With respect, Your Honor. Whoa, Cross interrupted smoothly. Survival instinct is not equivalent to mental fitness for complex financial management requiring sophisticated decision-making. Then let her be properly evaluated, Lysoren said, standing with commanding presence. But by a legitimate independent professional, not someone hired specifically by opposing counsel with vested interest in a particular outcome. Let the court appoint an unbiased psychiatrist. Let them assess Miss Beatrice thoroughly and professionally. And in the meantime, denying her access to her inheritance serves absolutely no purpose except ensuring she fails her mother's conditions by making them impossible to meet. Judge Holloway considered this carefully, weighing competing interests. I'm going to order a psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed professional with impeccable credentials. But I'm not freezing the entire estate as requested. Miss Beatrice will have access to sufficient funds to maintain the property and continue current operations. But major financial decisions requiring substantial capital will be temporarily suspended until we have that evaluation completed. Are we clear? It was a compromise that truly served no one. Jada could survive but not actually thrive or act decisively. Cross looked satisfied. He'd gotten most of what he wanted and created the exact obstacle he'd intended. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed like predators. Miss Beatrice, do you believe you're mentally stable? Are you concerned the evaluation will reveal you're unfit for this responsibility? Does your ex-husband's concern for your well-being change your feelings about him? Soren physically cleared a path through them, practically dragging Jada to the car, his protective instincts fully engaged. Once inside the vehicle, she finally broke down completely. They're going to take everything. They're going to prove I'm crazy, and I'll lose her company, her home, absolutely everything she tried to give me. No, Evangeline said with absolute conviction. The evaluator is Dr. Isadora Vance. I know her by reputation. She's exceptionally thorough, scrupulously fair, and she absolutely doesn't tolerate manipulation or political pressure. If you're honest with her, if you show her the truth of what you've endured and how you're genuinely recovering, she'll see your strength. What if she doesn't? What if she just sees a homeless woman who lost her mind? Then we appeal immediately and we fight even harder. But I genuinely don't think that's what she'll see. I think she'll see exactly what your mother saw, a woman who survived, something that destroys most people and came out ready and determined to rebuild. The evaluation was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Isadora Vance's office was deliberately neutral, comfortable without being too comfortable, professional without being cold. The doctor herself had kind eyes and an expression suggesting she'd heard absolutely every story and judged precisely none of them. Jada, I want you to understand clearly that this isn't an interrogation or trap. I'm here to assess your current mental state, your capacity for sound decision-making, and your ability to manage stress appropriately. I've read all the court documents. I know what you've been through. This is your opportunity to tell me, in your own words, what happened and where you are now, mentally and emotionally. For hours, Jada talked about her marriage, about the slow, systematic erosion of her identity, about Ash's control disguised as care and protection, about the divorce that left her with absolutely nothing, about months of homelessness, the fear, the hunger, the nights when survival itself seemed questionable. But she also talked about finding her mother's letters, about understanding what genuine love looked like when it refused to enable destruction, about the unexpected strength she'd discovered in having nothing, the clarity that came from being stripped of everything false and performative. Dr. Vance listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts or conclusions. Tell me specifically about your current projects. What are you actually doing with the inheritance resources? Jada described her work with Imani in detail, the plans to genuinely revive Beatrice Couture, the ongoing fight to preserve the historic district from demolition. She showed sketches she'd been working on, explained her vision for honoring her mother's legacy while creating something authentically new and meaningful. And how do you feel when you think about Asha now? The question caught her completely off guard. Jada sat with it, genuinely searching for truthful answers. Sad, mostly. Profoundly sad that I loved someone so completely who never actually saw me as a person with inherent value. Sad about all the years I lost, but not afraid anymore, not controlled. He can't hurt me now because I finally truly understand that his power was always an illusion I chose to believe in. Dr. Vance made another note. That's a remarkably mature and healthy perspective. It took losing absolutely everything to find it. Do you have thoughts of self-harm? Any suicidal ideation? No, I did during the homelessness. There were genuinely nights I wanted to stop existing entirely. But I don't feel that way now at all. Now I'm angry and I'm fiercely determined, and I'm not going to let him take anything else from me ever again. The evaluation continued over multiple intensive sessions. Dr. Vance asked about sleep patterns, eating habits, relationships with people in her current life. She asked about trauma symptoms, about triggers, about how Jada managed stress when it threatened to overwhelm her. Between sessions, Jada threw herself completely into work. The fashion show was coming together, a tribute collection based on her mother's original designs, reimagined and updated for contemporary audiences. It was risky, expensive, and exactly what Beatrice Couture needed to announce its genuine return to relevance. Imani worked beside her constantly, their complicated relationship slowly healing as they built something meaningful together. The resentment was still present, but it was being overshadowed by shared purpose and mutual respect. "Your mother would absolutely love these," Imani said one evening, carefully reviewing the collection. "They're her spirit and aesthetic, but your voice and vision. That's exactly what she always wanted, for you to take what she built and make it authentically yours. I keep waiting to fail spectacularly, to prove cross-right that I actually can't handle any of this. Then stop waiting for failure and start believing what everyone who genuinely loves you already knows. You're substantially stronger than you think you are." Late one night, working alone in the studio, Jada heard an unexpected knock at the mansion's side door. Laurent had gone home hours ago. Delphine was asleep upstairs, Against every instinct screaming caution, she answered it. Tobias Sheffield stood on her doorstep, looking nothing like the composed attorney from courtroom battles. His tie was loose, hair disheveled, and his expression carried weight that matched her own exhaustion. "I know I absolutely shouldn't be here," he said immediately. "This violates every professional standard I have. But I couldn't." He stopped, visibly struggling. "I need you to know something important." "Know what?" "I left the case entirely. I told Asher I couldn't represent him anymore under any circumstances. That's why Cross is handling everything now." Jada stared at him, genuinely shocked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I sat through those depositions and heard in excruciating detail what he actually did to you. Because I reviewed evidence showing he'd been systematically destroying your mother's company while claiming to support you. Because I have a conscience, and I couldn't ignore it anymore without losing myself completely. So you're here to what? Apologize? Assuage your guilt? I'm here to help you in any way you'll allow. If you'll let me, help me. You're the enemy. You were literally paid to destroy me." "I was. I'm not anymore." He pulled out a thick file. "This contains everything I know about Asher's development plans. The real ones, not what he's officially told the city. The corners he's cutting, the officials he's paying off, the genuine damage it would cause to the community. I can't give you this officially. It would absolutely cost me my license. But I can leave it on your doorstep and walk away. And if you happen to find it, that's not my legal responsibility." "Why should I trust you at all?" Tobias met her eyes directly, unflinchingly. "You shouldn't. Trust is earned over time, and I haven't earned yours yet. But your mother's friend Octavia came to see me personally. She told me about Eleanor, about how she fought until her dying breath to protect you. She asked me a simple question: who did I want to be? Someone who enables people like Asher, or someone who finally stands against them? I'm trying to answer that question through action." He placed the file carefully on the doorstep and turned to leave. "Wait," Jada said. "If you genuinely want to help, I need someone who understands how they think strategically. Someone who knows their tactics and weaknesses. Can you do that without compromising yourself further?" "I can absolutely try." "Then come to the fashion show next week." "Not as Asher's attorney." "Not as my attorney, just as someone who might understand what this moment means." Tobias nodded and disappeared into the night, leaving her with evidence that could potentially destroy Asher's plans entirely. Jada picked up the file and brought it inside. Page after page of damning documentation, bribery, environmental violations, systematic intimidation of community members who dared oppose the development. Everything she needed to stop him. But using it meant trusting Tobias Sheffield, a man who'd spent weeks trying to destroy her credibility in court. Good people really change sides so completely. Or was this another elaborate trap, the final betrayal waiting to spring? She was still awake when morning came, the file spread before her on the table, trying to decide if redemption was actually possible or if she was being set up for devastating failure. Her phone buzzed. Message from Dr. Vance's office. "Evaluation complete. Report will be filed with court tomorrow. Dr. Vance would like to speak with you personally before official release." This was it. The moment that would determine absolutely everything. Either Dr. Vance had seen her genuine strength, or she'd seen only damage and instability. Either Jada would keep fighting, or it would all end tomorrow. She looked at her mother's portrait hanging in the studio, seeking answers or comfort. "I hope I made you proud, Mama. I hope I proved I was worth waiting for, worth fighting for." The portrait offered no answers, no reassurance. But in the morning light streaming through windows, illuminating designs scattered around her, Jada felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly, but fierce determination. Whatever happened, she'd keep fighting. Because that's what her mother had taught her through every condition in that will. Some things are worth fighting for, even when outcomes are uncertain. Especially then, Chapter 5. Threads of War Doctor. Vance's office felt different this time, less clinical, more human somehow. The morning sun streamed through windows overlooking a carefully tended garden, and Jada sat with her hands folded, trying to appear composed, while her heart hammered violently against her ribs. Dr. Vance sat across from her, the completed report resting on the desk between them, like a verdict awaiting pronouncement. "I wanted to speak with you privately, before this becomes official court record," Dr. Vance began carefully. "Jada, I've been practicing psychiatry for over 20 years. I've evaluated hundreds of people broken by trauma, far less severe than what you've endured. What I found in our sessions was not incompetence or instability. What I found was significant trauma, serious, complex trauma from sustained psychological abuse over years." Jada's breath caught painfully in her throat, "But I also found something else equally important. I found a woman who survived against enormous odds, who's actively working toward healthy recovery, who's using appropriate coping mechanisms and building genuinely supportive relationships. I found someone who, despite having every conceivable reason to be consumed by anger and vengeance, is choosing to honor her mother's memory through creation rather than destruction. So you're saying I'm mentally fit?" "I'm saying you're remarkably, extraordinarily resilient. My report states clearly that while you show definite signs of complex PTSD from your marriage and subsequent homelessness, you're currently managing those symptoms appropriately and effectively. You're not a danger to yourself or others. You're entirely capable of making sound, reasoned decisions. And frankly, anyone suggesting otherwise is either profoundly ignorant of what genuine trauma recovery looks like or deliberately misrepresenting your condition for ulterior motives." The relief was so intense, Jada thought she might actually faint. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me for documenting truth. That's literally my job." Dr. Vance leaned forward slightly. "But I want you to know something else. My report also includes a strong recommendation for investigation into Asha Kim's conduct during your marriage. The patterns you described to me, systematic isolation, absolute financial control, deliberate destruction of your support systems, those are textbook hallmarks of coercive control. What happened to you wasn't just a difficult marriage. It was deliberate, calculated, sustained abuse. When the report was officially filed with the court, the media erupted immediately. The narrative shifted dramatically overnight. Headlines transformed from questioning Jada's stability to identifying abuse patterns. Psychiatric expert identifies coercive control in Kinvi marriage dominated every news cycle. Asha's team scrambled desperately. Cross issued statements calling the evaluation biased, claiming Dr. Vance had been somehow influenced by Jada's attorneys. But Dr. Vance's credentials were too impeccable, her reputation too sterling. The accusations fell completely flat, making Asha's team look desperate and dishonest. The fashion show was scheduled for that weekend. Jada barely slept, obsessively perfecting every detail. The venue was the grand ballroom of the historic Rothschild Hotel, a beautiful building that Asha's development plans would demolish. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. The night before the show, a package arrived at the mansion. Inside was her mother's wedding veil, the delicate, beautiful veil Jada had refused to wear when she married Asha because it felt like accepting her mother's approval of that marriage. Now it was torn to absolute shreds, destroyed with such violence that pieces were barely recognizable as fabric. The note was in Asha's distinctive handwriting. "You destroyed everything she loved. Now I'll destroy everything you're trying to build." Laurent wanted to call police immediately. Evangeline wanted to file for a restraining order. But Jada looked at the destroyed veil and felt something unexpected, absolute clarity. Let him threaten. Let him rage impotently. He's showing everyone exactly who he really is. We document this thoroughly. We add it to our evidence file, and we continue with the show. He wants me afraid and paralyzed. I won't give him that satisfaction. The day of the show arrived cold and bright. Jada stood backstage watching models prepare, feeling her mother's presence so strongly it was almost physical. Every piece in the collection told a story, From innocence to darkness to hard-won resurrection. It wasn't just fashion. It was testimony in fabric and thread. Imani appeared beside her, vibrating with nervous energy. The venue is completely packed. Every major fashion editor, every society columnist, every influential person who matters in our world. And the entire Kinvi family is here. All of them seated prominently. Perfect. Let them watch everything. The lights dimmed dramatically. Music swelled emotionally. The show began. The first pieces were pure innocence, flowing fabrics in soft, gentle colors, designs that spoke eloquently of childhood summers and mother-daughter afternoons spent dreaming together. The audience murmured sincere appreciation. Then the collection shifted dramatically. The fabrics became heavier, darker, more constrained. The silhouettes became restrictive, almost suffocating. One dress had a beautiful, intricate bodice, but sleeves that bound the arms uncomfortably. Another had an elegant neckline that transformed into a collar that looked almost like a restraint. The metaphor wasn't subtle. Beauty hiding captivity. Jada watched from the wings as understanding rippled through the sophisticated audience. They were seeing her story told wordlessly in fabric and thread, in every uncomfortable constraint and beautiful surface. The final section erupted onto the runway like a declaration of war. Bold, fearless colors, sharp architectural lines, fabrics that moved like armor, dresses that declared strength unapologetically, that refused to apologize for taking up space. The finale piece was pure white, architectural, impossible to ignore. A wedding dress that looked nothing like traditional bridal wear and everything like a declaration of independence. The audience rose to their feet before the last model had even left the stage. The applause was absolutely deafening. Jada walked out for the designer's bow, and the noise somehow intensified impossibly. Critics were openly crying. Fashion editors were frantically typing on their phones, already composing reviews. Cameras flashed like lightning. She looked out into the audience and found Asher. He sat frozen, his face contorted with rage, understanding exactly what she'd done. She told their entire story without naming him once. And everyone understood anyway. His mother, Lenore, sat nearby, her expression harder to read. Cold calculation mixed with something that might have been regret or respect. His sister Bryn had her phone out, already managing the narrative on social media. But his younger brother Hollis looked genuinely stricken, as if seeing his family clearly for the first time in his life. Then Jada found Tobias, standing at the very back of the room. He wasn't taking photos or notes. He was just watching her intently, and when their eyes met directly, he nodded slightly. Acknowledgement, respect, something more complicated that neither of them was ready to name or examine. Backstage was absolute chaos. Orders poured in faster than they could process them. Fashion houses wanted to carry the entire collection. Department stores competed aggressively for exclusive rights. In one show, Jada had resurrected Beatrice Couture from near death to must-have status, but she barely processed the success. She was thinking about Asher's face, about the threat he'd sent, about the absolute certainty in her gut that this wasn't remotely over. She was right. As guests began leaving in clusters, the fire alarm erupted shrilly. Security evacuated everyone calmly and professionally. But as they filed orderly out, Jada smelled smoke. Real, acrid smoke. Laurent found her in the crowd, his face grim. The electrical system. Someone deliberately sabotaged it. If the fire had started during the show with all those people packed inside, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. They all understood how close they'd come to catastrophe. Tobias appeared, his expression severe. I saw him, Asher. He was in the basement earlier near the electrical access. I followed him because something felt wrong. He was tampering with the electrical panels, but when I got close enough, he ran. I couldn't prove anything definitively, but I know what I saw. Why were you even looking for him? Because I know him intimately. I know how he operates when threatened. I knew he wouldn't just sit through your triumph without trying something destructive. The fire department confirmed deliberate sabotage. Someone had damaged wiring specifically designed to create a slow burn that would have gone unnoticed until catastrophically too late. They'd saved security footage showing a figure in the basement, but the camera angle made definitive identification legally impossible. Asher's response when questioned: he'd been in the restroom. No witnesses to confirm, but no proof otherwise either. That night at the mansion, Jada stood in her mother's studio surrounded by sketches for the next collection and evidence of attempted murder. The contrast was staggering, surreal. "He's escalating dangerously," Evangeline said, having come straight from dealing with police, her professional composure visibly cracking. The veil was intimidation. This was attempted mass casualty. "He's losing control of himself." "Good." Jada's voice was ice. "Let him lose control publicly and obviously. Every action he takes makes our case exponentially stronger and his weaker. Unless he actually succeeds in seriously hurting someone," the thought sent cold terror through her. "Then we need to move faster. How soon can we present the evidence about his development corruption to the city council? With what Tobias provided and what Octavia compiled, we could be ready within a week. But Jada, using information from Tobias, could be legally questionable. He obtained it as Asher's attorney, even if he claims otherwise. He obtained it as a concerned citizen, witnessing ongoing criminal activity. That's our story, and we're not deviating from it." A sound at the door made them both turn sharply. Tobias stood there, having been let in by Laurent. "I heard what happened tonight. I want to help however I can." "You keep saying that," Jada said, "but helping means potentially destroying your career, maybe your entire reputation. Why would you do that?" Tobias stepped fully into the room, and for the first time ever, his professional mask fell completely away. "Because I watched my mother stay with my father for years. He was a prominent attorney, widely respected, considered powerful. Behind closed doors, he was systematically cruel. She stayed because she thought she had no choice, because he'd convinced her no one would believe her, because he controlled absolutely everything. She died believing she'd somehow failed, that her suffering was her own fault." His voice broke slightly. "When I sat in those depositions and heard Delphine describe Eleanor's pain, heard Imani talk about the systematic sabotage, heard your story through everyone else's testimony, I saw my mother. I saw what might have happened if someone had helped her, if someone had stood up and said this isn't acceptable. I can't go back and save her, but I can help you." Jada studied him carefully, really looked at him as a person rather than an opponent. Saw the grief he carried, the guilt, the desperate need to make something right that had gone wrong years ago. "Helping me won't save your mother or undo the past." "I know, but it might save me from becoming my father." Evangeline looked between them carefully. "If you're going to work with us, even informally, we need strict ground rules. Nothing privileged. Nothing that directly violates attorney-client confidence. Only information you obtained outside that relationship or information revealing ongoing criminal activity that negates privilege." Agreed completely. They worked through the night, methodically building a comprehensive case against Asher's development plans. The evidence was devastating. Bribes to city officials, falsified environmental impact reports, deliberate manipulation of property values through systematic intimidation. Combined with Octavia's meticulous documentation and community testimonies, it was more than enough to stop the development entirely and potentially trigger serious criminal investigations. As dawn broke, Jada's phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Jada?" A woman's voice shaking violently with fear. "This is Simone. I need help desperately. I need to talk to you, please. I don't know who else to call. I'm terrified." Jada's first instinct was immediate refusal. This was the woman who'd replaced her, who'd stood by Asher while he sued for Jada's inheritance. But something in Simone's voice, pure terror, absolute desperation, sounded painfully, intimately familiar. "Where are you right now?" "At the hospital. I'm in labor, but that's not why I'm calling." "He pushed me, Jada. We were arguing about the show, about you, and he pushed me violently down the stairs." The baby's coming early because he pushed me, and I'm terrified he's going to come back and finish. I'm on my way immediately." She looked at Evangeline and Tobias. "Simone's in labor at Mercy Hospital." Asher pushed her. "She's asking for help." "It could be an elaborate trap," Evangeline warned. "Or it could be another woman realizing she married a monster and desperately trying to escape." Jada grabbed her coat. "Either way I'm going. My mother would have gone. She would have helped, even knowing it might hurt her. That's who she was. That's who I need to be." Tobias stood. "I'm coming with you. For protection at minimum, if nothing else." At the hospital, they found Simone in a private room, hooked to various monitors, her face swollen from crying and pain. She looked younger than Jada remembered, fragile in ways that had nothing to do with pregnancy. When she saw Jada, fresh tears spilled immediately. "You came. I genuinely didn't think you would. Tell me exactly what happened." The story came out in broken, painful pieces. The isolation had started slowly, Asher subtly suggesting she didn't need her friends, that they were jealous of her happiness. The criticism, her clothes, her words, her thoughts, all somehow wrong. The financial control, her accounts monitored obsessively, her purchases questioned aggressively. The escalation, verbal abuse that became pushing, shoving, escalating intimidation. Tonight I told him the show was beautiful, that you were genuinely talented. He went absolutely insane, started screaming that I was betraying him like you did, that everyone turns against him eventually. He grabbed my arm, and when I tried to pull away, he pushed hard. I fell down half a flight of stairs. Jada sat beside the bed, taking Simone's trembling hand. "I'm so sorry. I know exactly what you're describing, every single word of it. He said you were crazy. He said you made everything up to steal from him. I believed him because I loved him, and you believe people you love. But watching you tonight, seeing what you've built from nothing, I realized he'd been lying about you. And if he lied about you, he was lying about everything. You need to press charges immediately. Document everything. Don't let him convince you this was somehow an accident. I'm scared. His family has so much power, not as much as they used to. And you're not alone anymore. I'll help you. We'll make absolutely sure you and your baby are safe." Simone squeezed her hand desperately. "Why would you help me? I took your place. I believed his lies about you, because nobody deserves what he does to people. Because helping you isn't about him at all. It's about us, about women refusing to let men like him win." Hours later, when Simone's baby was finally born, a daughter, miraculously healthy despite the trauma, Jada stood at the nursery window, watching the tiny life that had entered the world through such violence. Tobias stood beside her quietly. "You didn't have to help her at all." "Yes, I did. If I'd turned my back, I'd become exactly what he tried to make me. Small, cruel, vindictive. My mother didn't raise me to be that person. Your mother raised someone truly extraordinary." Jada looked at him. "Don't make this more than it is yet. You're helping because of guilt about your mother. I'm accepting that help because I desperately need it. That doesn't automatically make us friends or allies or whatever you're imagining." "Fair enough." But he didn't move away from the window. And neither did she. When Asher arrived at the hospital later, security stopped him immediately. Simone had already given a detailed statement to police, showing bruises that matched her account of being pushed. Tobias stepped forward, providing his witness account of seeing Asher near the sabotaged electrical panels at the venue. The police didn't arrest Asher immediately. His family's connections bought him temporary freedom. But they issued a restraining order, keeping him away from both Simone and the baby. As they escorted him out, Asher caught sight of Jada through a window. The look on his face was pure, unfiltered hatred. He mouthed words she couldn't hear but could read clearly on his lips. "This isn't over." Jada mouthed back, "I know, because wars don't end with single battles. They end when one side finally breaks completely." And Asher Kinv was just beginning to understand that he was the one breaking. Chapter 6. Testimony in Blood. Simone's testimony took place in a closed hearing, deliberately away from the media circus. But Jada sat in the back of the room as Simone had specifically requested, moral support from the unlikeliest possible source. Evangeline conducted the examination with surprising, deliberate gentleness. "Miss Turner, can you tell us how you met Asher Kinv?" Simone's voice was quiet but steady, determined. "At a charity gala. He was charming, successful, confident. He made me feel like I was genuinely the only woman in the room. Within weeks, we were absolutely inseparable. When did the relationship fundamentally change?" Looking back now, it changed almost immediately. But I didn't see it then. He'd suggest I wear different clothes because mine weren't appropriate for someone dating a man of his stature. He'd correct how I spoke in public, saying he was helping me fit into his world. He introduced me to his family and friends, but actively discouraged me from bringing him around mine, saying they made him uncomfortable for reasons he couldn't quite explain. Did this pattern escalate? Yes. He wanted access to my bank accounts to help manage my finances properly. He'd go through my phone constantly, saying couples shouldn't have secrets. He'd get genuinely angry if I spent time with friends without him. One time, I went to lunch with my sister without mentioning it first, and he showed up at the restaurant absolutely furious, accusing me of lying and sneaking around on him. Evander Cross, still representing Asher, objected repeatedly, but the judge, having thoroughly read Dr. Vance's report about Jada's similar experiences, allowed the testimony to continue. "Miss Turner, you've made extremely serious allegations about the night of the fashion show. Can you describe what happened?" Simone's hands trembled visibly, but she continued with determination. "We attended the show together. Asher was tense the entire time, radiating rage. When Jada's collection came out, I could physically feel his fury beside me. But I thought the designs were beautiful. I said so in the car afterward. He absolutely exploded, started screaming that I was just like Jada, betraying him, disrespecting him. I tried to calm him down, and he grabbed my arm so hard it bruised." She pulled up her sleeve, showing marks that had faded to yellow-green, but were still clearly visible. "When we got home, the argument continued escalating. I told him he needed to let go of his hatred for Jada, that it was consuming him destructively. He said I didn't understand what she'd done to him, how she'd poisoned everyone against him. I said maybe people were seeing truth for the first time. That's when he pushed me. I fell down the stairs. I felt something tear inside me, and I knew immediately the baby was in danger." "Did he help you afterward?" "No, he stood at the top of the stairs and said, 'This is what happens when you side with her against me.' Then he left. I called an ambulance myself." The room was silent except for the court reporters typing. "Miss Turner, you've provided audio recordings of other incidents. Can you explain what's in them?" Simone nodded to Evangeline, who played the audio. Asher's voice filled the room, vicious and cold in ways that never appeared in his public persona. "You're worthless without me. You understand that, right? I could leave you tomorrow and you'd have nothing. No one would want you. You're lucky I even bother with you." Another recording. "Stop crying immediately. You're embarrassing me. If you can't control yourself, I'll give you something to really cry about." Another. "I told you to transfer that money. Why is it still in your account? Are you trying to steal from me? Is that what this is?" The pattern was undeniable, devastating. The same tactics, the same threats, the same systematic destruction of self-worth that Jada had experienced. Evander Cross tried his usual aggressive approach. "Miss Turner, isn't it true you're testifying in exchange for financial support from Miss Beatrice, that this is a coordinated attack on my client?" Simone looked directly at him, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Jada has offered me nothing except a safe place to stay with my daughter until I can afford my own place. She didn't ask me to testify. I came forward because I saw what he did to her, what he tried to do to me. And I realized if we don't stop him now, there'll be another woman after me, and another after her. Men like Asher don't change fundamentally. They just find new victims." Cross had no response to that raw honesty. When the hearing concluded, Jada waited outside for Simone. The younger woman emerged, looking exhausted but lighter somehow, as if speaking truth aloud had lifted a crushing weight she'd been carrying. "Thank you for being there," Simone said quietly. "You were incredibly brave." "Thank you. I just told the truth." "That's not bravery." "Yes, it absolutely is. Especially when truth is this painful." Jada hesitated, then continued. "I've arranged for you to stay in the guest house at my property. It's completely separate from the main mansion, private, secure. You and your daughter will be safe there while you figure out your next steps. I can't accept that. You don't owe me anything at all. I'm not offering because I owe you. I'm offering because no woman should have to figure out how to escape a man like Asher, while also worrying about keeping her child safe. Take the help. Pass it forward someday when you're able." Simone's eyes filled with tears. "He always said you were cold, selfish, vindictive. You're none of those things. I'm all of those things sometimes. But I'm also my mother's daughter, and she taught me that surviving isn't enough. You have to help others survive too, or what's the point?" That night, media coverage shifted dramatically. Simone's testimony leaked. Not the recordings, which were legally protected, but enough details to paint a clear picture. Two different women, years apart, describing identical patterns of abuse from the same man. Asher's family began to fracture visibly. Publicly, his mother, Lenore, released a carefully worded statement through her attorney. "After careful consideration and deeply disturbing revelations about my son's conduct, I can no longer provide financial or public support for his legal efforts. A mother's love doesn't require enabling harm to others. I pray Asher seeks the professional help he clearly needs." It was calculated damage control, separating herself from her son to protect the family name and reputation. But it was also devastating. Lenore controlled significant family resources. Without her backing, Asher's legal war became suddenly dramatically more expensive. His sister Bryn was more direct and public. On her evening news program, she made a statement that shocked everyone. "Recent allegations about my brother represent patterns of behavior I can no longer ignore or excuse. While I love my family deeply, I cannot stand silent while women are harmed. To anyone affected by Asher Kinv's actions, I believe you, and I'm genuinely sorry we didn't protect you." It was professional suicide for her relationship with her father and Asher, but it saved her career. The public respected her for choosing truth over family loyalty. Only Garrison Kinv, Asher's father, remained defiant. Despite his recent stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed and speech-impaired, he issued a statement through his own attorney. "My son is the victim of a coordinated attack by vindictive women and disloyal family members. The truth will eventually prevail." But even that solidarity was about to crumble. Hollis Kinv arrived at Jada's mansion unannounced. Laurent was hesitant to let him in, but Jada agreed to see him in the formal parlor with both Laurent and Tobias present as witnesses. Hollis looked nothing like his brother. Where Asher was all sharp edges and calculated charm, Hollis carried himself with quiet discomfort, as if he'd never fit comfortably in his own skin or his family's rigid expectations. "I know you have absolutely no reason to trust me," he began immediately. "I'm a Kinv. That name is poison right now, and deservedly so. Then why are you here? Because I've spent my entire life watching my father and brother destroy people and pretending I didn't see it. Pretending I was fundamentally different because I didn't actively participate. But silence is participation, isn't it? Watching someone hurt others and doing nothing makes you complicit." He pulled out a folder, placing it carefully on the table between them. "This contains everything I know about my family's activities. Financial records showing bribes my father arranged when he was on the bench. Evidence of Asher's deliberate sabotage of your mother's company. Proof that my father coached Asher on how to legally isolate you during your marriage. All of it." Jada didn't touch the folder. "Why now? Why not years ago when it might have saved my mother, or prevented Simone's suffering, or stopped any of this? Because I was a coward. Because I told myself it wasn't my responsibility. Because I benefited from their corruption while pretending my hands were clean. His voice broke. But I watched your fashion show. I saw what you created from the ashes of what my family tried to destroy. And I realized that if I don't act now, I'm not just a coward. I'm complicit in everything that happens after this. Tobias picked up the folder, reviewing its contents. His expression grew darker with each page. This is enough to bring criminal charges against your father, your brother, possibly even some business associates. You understand what this means for you personally. I understand I'll lose my inheritance completely, that my father will disown me if his stroke hasn't already left him incapable of doing so, that I'll never work in the industry my family controlled, that I'll be viewed as a traitor. Hollis met Jada's eyes directly. But I'll also be able to look at myself in the mirror. And maybe someday someone will need help standing up to people like my family, and I'll actually know how to do it because I finally found the courage to stand up myself. What about your mother? Bryn. My mother is trying to save herself. Bryn is trying to save her career. I'm not judging them for that, but I need to save my soul, if that doesn't sound too dramatic. Jada studied him, searching for deception and finding only exhausted honesty. If we use this, your family will come after you viciously. Your father may be impaired, but Asher won't forget this betrayal. Asher stopped being my brother the day I realized what he was doing to you and did nothing. Whatever he does to me now, I've earned it through years of cowardly silence. You'll need protection, legal representation, somewhere safe to stay while this unfolds. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not offering because you asked. I'm offering because my mother would have. She believed people could change, could choose differently, could find courage even late. If she could believe that about me, after everything I did, I can believe it about you. Hollis's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your kindness. Probably not. But deserving and needing are different things. After Hollis left, with assurances of a secure location and legal representation, Tobias and Jada reviewed the evidence he'd provided. It was utterly damning. Combined with everything else, it built an overwhelming case against both Garrison and Asher Kinv. This changes everything, Tobias said. With Hollis's testimony and documentation, the district attorney will have to open formal investigations. The development project will be halted pending those investigations. You'll meet your mother's conditions almost by default. I don't want to win by default. I want them to pay for what they did. To my mother, to all the families they pushed out of homes, to every woman Asher manipulated. Default victory means they might escape real consequences. They won't escape. This evidence ensures that, but you need to be prepared for what's coming. They'll strike back. Cornered animals are always the most dangerous. As if summoned by those words, Jada's phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. Asher's voice came through, shaking with barely controlled rage. You think you've won? Turning my family against me, stealing my brother's loyalty, building your little empire on lies. You've taken everything from me, Jada, everything. You took everything from yourself. I just survived you. This isn't over. You hear me? I don't care about the money anymore. I don't care about the property. I care about making sure you understand what it means to cross me. You're going to regret every choice you've made since your mother died. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The call ended abruptly. Jada looked at Tobias, who'd heard enough through the speaker to understand the gravity. We need to increase security immediately. Get that recording to police. Document everything. He's unraveling, completely losing control, which makes him unpredictable and exponentially more dangerous than when he was calculating. That night, Jada couldn't sleep. She walked through the mansion, checking locks obsessively, looking at shadows, feeling the weight of everything closing in. The zoning hearing was scheduled for the next week. Criminal investigations were opening. Simone and her baby were safe but traumatized. Hollis had betrayed his family. The Kinv empire was crumbling, and somewhere out there, Asher was planning something that would make all his previous cruelty look restrained. She stood in her mother's studio, surrounded by sketches and evidence files, trying to find clarity in the chaos. Her phone buzzed with a message from Octavia. The city council has moved up the zoning hearing. It's tomorrow. Garrison Kinv made calls from his hospital bed. He's using every last bit of influence to strike while we're unprepared. We need to be ready. Tomorrow. Not next week. Tomorrow. Jada looked at the clock. Past midnight. She had hours to prepare for the most important hearing of her life. Knowing that Asher was out there somewhere, making his own preparations for whatever revenge he'd promised. She called everyone. Evangeline, Soren, Imani, Octavia, Tobias. Emergency meeting immediately. We have less than 12 hours to prepare. The Kinvs are making their final play. As her team assembled in the mansion's library, working frantically through the night on strategy and evidence, Jada stood at the window watching the darkness outside. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Strength isn't about never being afraid, darling. It's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. I'm terrified, Mama, she whispered to the glass, but I'm ready. I promise you, I'm ready. In the darkness beyond the windows, something moved. A shadow that didn't belong. Security lights that flickered strangely. A sense of threat that made her blood run cold. Tomorrow's hearing would determine the fate of her mother's neighborhood and her inheritance conditions. But tonight, something else was coming. Something that would test whether survival had truly made her strong or simply left her fragile in new ways. The war was reaching its climax, and Asher Kinv had just made his opening move in the final battle. Chapter 7. The Hearing That Broke the City. The city council chambers filled before dawn broke. Community members crowded every seat, stood along walls, filled the overflow room completely. They'd heard the hearing was moved up, a final desperate attempt to push through the development before mounting evidence made it impossible. Jada arrived with her entire team. Evangeline, Soren, Octavia, Imani, Laurent, even Paloma. They carried boxes of evidence, community testimonies, architectural assessments. Across the aisle, Asher sat with only Evander Cross and a handful of paid consultants. His family was conspicuously absent. Just Asher, isolated and visibly deteriorating. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face haggard, hands shaking as papers slipped from his grasp. Councillor Helena Pritchard called the hearing to order. Mr. Cross, you may begin. Cross stood smooth despite the chaos surrounding his client. This is fundamentally progress versus stagnation. Kinv Enterprises proposes development, bringing significant tax revenue, jobs, modernization. Yes, some historic buildings would be demolished, but progress requires difficult choices. He presented charts, projections, glossy development plans. When Soren stood for cross-examination, everything unraveled quickly. These independent analysts received financial incentives tied to favorable results. This one was paid 3 times standard rate, with bonuses contingent on supporting development. He placed documents before the council. Furthermore, studies claim buildings are structurally unsound, yet independent engineers found them perfectly sound. Reports were deliberately falsified. The council members leaned forward, interested now. When Jada presented, her voice was steady. Councillors, I'm here to talk about community, about what we lose when we prioritize profit over preservation. She showed photographs of the district. Netus, my mother spent decades here. She raised me, built her company, became part of a community valuing beauty and history. When developers circled, the entire neighborhood stood together. Laurent and Paloma testified about the neighborhood's value. Community members followed, each story painting a picture of people, fighting against those viewing them as obstacles. Then Tobias shocked everyone by standing to testify against his former client. I'm here to provide testimony about ongoing criminal activity, which nullifies attorney-client privilege. He presented documents showing bribes, falsified studies, intimidation campaigns. Cross objected. Pritchard overruled him. Continue, Mr. Sheffield. What Kinv Enterprises planned wasn't development. It was systematic destruction through illegal means. Asher exploded. "You betrayed me. This is a conspiracy." "Mr. Kinv, control yourself," Pritchard warned. But Asher was beyond control. "You want truth?" "Yes, I sabotaged her mother's company. I made sure she'd have nothing to return to, because she was mine." The chamber fell silent. He'd confessed everything. "I've already won the only victory that counts. I destroyed her relationship with her mother. She never got to fix it. I won because she'll carry that guilt forever." Security escorted him out while he laughed. Octavia's hand touched Jada's shoulder. "He didn't win. Your mother knew the truth. She never blamed you." The council deliberated briefly. The application is denied. Furthermore, we're ordering a full investigation." The community erupted in cheers. They'd won. They returned to the mansion exhausted but relieved. For hours, they celebrated. Then the power cut out. Emergency lights cast everything in eerie red. Security system disabled. Then glass shattering, systematically someone destroying everything. Laurent called police. Jada grabbed Imani and Delphine, locking them in her mother's study. Through walls, they heard destruction. Then footsteps approaching. "Jada," Asher's voice terrifyingly calm. "I know you're in there. The police are coming. I'm not leaving until we finish this. You took everything from me. I was never supposed to be broken. You did that. I chose to love you." A gunshot. Screaming. When police arrived, they found Asher barricaded with a gun, surrounded by wreckage. No one was hurt. The gunshot had been a threat. They negotiated for hours. As dawn broke, Asher was taken into custody. In her mother's studio, Jada found decades of sketches shredded, fabric slashed, the sewing machine smashed. She sank to the floor. Tobias found her there. "You survived him again. Look what he destroyed. He destroyed paper and fabric. Your mother's real legacy is you. He can't touch that." Jada picked up a torn sketch fragment. "Then we rebuild again." Imani appeared, phone in hand. Police found Asher's car abandoned. They found another gun. They think he's planning something worse. Asher Kinv had vanished. Armed and unhinged, planning his final revenge. Chapter 8. The Hunt. The mansion became a fortress. Police stationed outside, security upgraded, panic buttons everywhere. Jada moved through her home like a prisoner, watching shadows, unable to sleep. Simone called, voice shaking. "Is it true? He has a gun, and nobody knows where he is?" "It's true, but you're safe here. When he gets like this, he plans maximum damage." Simone paused. "Check on anyone you love. He won't come for you directly. He'll destroy something you care about." The warning sent ice through Jada. She called everyone, Imani, Octavia, Paloma. Days passed with no sign of Asher. Federal authorities examined Kinv family corruption. But none of that mattered while Asher was out there. Tobias barely left standing guard. "You don't have to stay," she told him one sleepless night. "I know." They sat in the library. "When you were representing him, did you know about what he'd done?" Tobias was quiet. "I suspected. I convinced myself it wasn't my job to judge." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve honesty. If I'm going to help you rebuild, you need to know who I really am." Before Jada could respond, her phone rang. Imani's voice strained and frightened. "Don't panic. I'm at Beatrice Couture offices. Asher was here, hiding. He's between me and the exit. He has the gun. He wants to talk to you." Tobias was already calling police. "Put him on." Asher's voice came through, eerily calm. "Hello, wife. Ex-wife. What do you want?" "For someone to finally admit I'm not the villain. You destroyed me. Let Imani go. She helped you. Everyone who believed you deserves to understand." Tobias mouthed, "Keep him talking." "What do you want? You want me to say I'm sorry?" "Fine, I'm sorry I fought back. Don't patronize me. If you hurt Imani, there's no going back. You'll go to prison forever." Silence. "Then you think I care? There's nothing left. Come here, alone. We'll talk. Then I'll let her go. The police are already on their way." "I'm not afraid to die." "Jada, Are you afraid to watch someone else die because of you? The call ended. Jada was moving, grabbing her coat. Tobias blocked her. You're not going. He has Imani. Let the police handle this. They waited. Minutes felt like hours. Then Octavia arrived. Your mother faced something similar once. A business partner tried to burn down her studio. She wanted to confront him. I stopped her. The police handled it. Jada's phone buzzed. A text. He's letting me go. Don't come here. He's planning something else. On the news, they watched Imani emerge, shaken but unharmed. The standoff lasted through the night. At dawn, police breached. They found Asher unconscious from a deliberate overdose. Empty pill bottles. A note, pages of rambling accusations, blame, twisted declarations. Paramedics saved him. He woke in a hospital under guard, facing charges that would put him away for decades. Jada read his note. Page after page of a man who couldn't accept he destroyed his own life. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He just wants me to admit I'm as bad as he is. Are you going to respond? Evangeline asked. No, he'll never understand that he did this to himself. When Imani arrived, Jada held her without speaking. I'm sorry, Jada whispered. Stop. This isn't on you. He made every choice. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Asher was deemed competent despite his suicide attempt. The trial date was set. The evidence was overwhelming. In the weeks before trial, Jada focused on rebuilding. The mansion was repaired. The studio reconstructed. Beatrice Couture launched its collection to critical acclaim. The historic district was designated Protected Heritage. Everything was falling into place. So why did Jada feel so hollow? Dr. Vance had warned her. Trauma doesn't disappear when the threat ends. Sometimes it gets worse when you're finally safe enough to feel it. Tobias found her in the studio late one night. The trial starts next week. I know. You'll have to testify. Face him. I know that too. Are you ready? No, but I'll do it anyway. Because that's what my mother taught me. Outside, the sun rose over gardens her mother had planted. In 1 week, Jada would face Asher Kinv one final time. But tonight, she whispered to the sketches, I'm trying. Mama, I hope you can see that. The sketches offered no answer. But in the morning light, Jada felt something shift. Not healing yet, but the possibility of it. 1 week until the final confrontation that would determine whether she'd truly escaped his shadow. Chapter 9. Reckoning. The courthouse steps felt different. No media circus, just serious journalists. Jada wore a suit from her mother's final collection, deep navy speaking strength. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Simone sat in the front row. Asher looked diminished in prison clothing. He glanced at Jada once, then looked away. The prosecution's case was methodical. Financial records showing sabotage. Documentation of bribes. His own recorded confessions. Delphine described watching Eleanor deteriorate. Unable to help, Laurent detailed the systematic destruction of estate. Finances. Paloma explained how her business was targeted. Then, Simone's turn. She recounted their relationship from charming beginning to terrifying end. The isolation, control, escalating violence. I loved him, Simone said quietly. I didn't realize I was choosing captivity disguised as romance. I can't stay silent knowing I could prevent the next woman. Finally, Jada's turn. Can you describe your marriage? Jada took a breath and started at the beginning. The isolation, not through demands but subtle manipulation. The financial control, the emotional abuse. When he divorced me, he told me nobody would want a homeless woman. I realized that was his goal, not to love me, but to break me so completely that I'd believe I needed him to exist. The defense cross-examination was aggressive. Isn't it convenient your mother left you millions? My mother loved me. That's unconditional love. You've built quite a successful company on sympathy. I built a successful company on talent and hard work. You could have left any time. Jada looked directly at Asher. Yes, but he was very good at what he did. I'm done carrying guilt for his actions. He chose cruelty. That's on him. Expert witnesses followed on coercive control, financial abuse, psychological manipulation. Hollis testified, describing growing up with Asher. Dr. Vance explained the psychological damage. Mr. Kinv didn't just abuse Miss Beatrice. He attempted to erase her as a person. Finally, Asher testified. His carefully constructed narrative, he'd loved Jada, been betrayed. But when the prosecution cross-examined, everything fell apart. You loved Miss Beatrice, yet you divorced her and left her homeless? I do seem she made that necessary. Let's review your own words. They played his confession. His voice filled the courtroom, admitting sabotage. I was emotional. You held Miss Beatrice's cousin hostage with a gun. Asher's composure cracked. You don't understand. To give them everything and have them turn on you. So Miss Beatrice is responsible for your choices. She's responsible for taking everything from me. You took everything from yourself. Every action, every crime, every moment of cruelty, those were your choices. The jury deliberated. When they returned, Jada held Simone's hand on one side and Tobias's on the other. On the charge of stalking, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty. On and on, guilty verdict after guilty verdict. When the foreman finished, Asher sat frozen. He truly believed he would escape consequences. Outside, Jada stood in the afternoon sun, feeling the weight of fear finally lifting. Simone hugged her tightly. We did it, they believed us. Octavia appeared. Eleanor would have been so proud of you. That night, Jada stood in her mother's studio. The verdict hadn't erased the trauma, but it had validated her truth. She began sketching, not dresses, but a building, a community center, a place for women escaping situations like hers. Tobias found her. You never sleep? She showed him the drawings. This is what I want to build. A place for women, housing, job training, legal services. Your mother would love that. What about us? Tobias asked. Where do we go from here? I don't know. I'm not ready for romance. I may never be. But I want you in my life. That works for me. We'll figure it out as we go. One day at a time. One day at a time. As dawn broke, Jada felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not complete peace, but the beginning of it. Asher Kinv had tried to erase her. Instead, he'd forced her to rebuild herself into something stronger. That was his final failure. She hadn't just survived him. She'd used everything he'd done to become more than she'd been before. The war wasn't quite finished. Sentencing still to come, healing still ongoing. But the worst was over. Now came the work of living, really living, in the freedom she'd fought so hard to reclaim. Chapter 10. The Inheritance. The sentencing hearing came on a cold morning. Judge Holloway gave Asher 28 years. With good behavior, he'd be eligible for parole in 18. But even that felt like a lifetime. Long enough for Jada to build something enduring. Asher showed no emotion when sentence was read. He simply stood, was handcuffed, and was led away. He didn't look at Jada. He just disappeared, becoming smaller with each step. Outside, reporters asked how she felt. Jada surprised herself with truth. Empty, mostly. I thought this would feel triumphant, but it just feels like the end of something terrible. Now comes the harder part, figuring out who I am when I'm not fighting him. The community center broke ground in early spring. Jada insisted on being there for every decision. This wasn't just a building, it was a promise. Imani managed the project while Jada focused on Beatrice Couture's expansion. The company had grown beyond expectations. They'd gone from nearly bankrupt to industry leader. Your mother's vision, but your execution, Imani said. That's what makes it special. Simone had found her footing too. She'd enrolled in college, studying social work, determined to help others navigate what she'd survived. I'm moving out soon, Simone told Jada. I have enough saved for my own place. I need to prove to myself that I can stand alone. You're always welcome here. I know. But I need this." They sat watching Simone's daughter discover flowers, marveling at how new life emerged from old soil. Tobias had become a permanent presence. He'd opened his own practice, specializing in representing abuse survivors. "I'm trying to balance the scales," he told Jada. "For every case I took defending people like Asher, I want to take 3 helping people he victimized. My mother used to say that what matters isn't where you started. What matters is whether you keep walking toward better. Your mother was wise. She was. I wish I'd appreciated that while she was alive." The guilt still surfaced sometimes. Late nights when Jada would remember her mother's voice on the phone, begging her to come home. But Dr. Vance had told her the guilt might never fully disappear. But it can transform from something that haunts you to something that motivates you. The community center's grand opening came almost exactly 2 years after Jada had been digging through trash. Broken and hopeless, the building rose from the lot Asher had coveted, beautiful in its purpose. Inside were apartments for women in crisis, classrooms for job training, a legal aid office, childcare facilities, gardens where people could grow food and flowers. A plaque at the entrance read, "The Eleanor Beatrice Center for New Beginnings. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time you do." Jada stood before the gathered crowd and struggled to find words big enough for what she felt. "My mother left me money," she began. "But that's not what she really left me. She left me a map back to myself. She left me conditions that forced me to remember who I was. She left me purpose." She gestured to the building. "This center isn't charity. It's recognition that sometimes we all need help finding our way back to ourselves. My mother gave me that help through her inheritance. Now we're creating a place where other women can find the same thing." The crowd erupted in applause. Jada's eyes found the people who mattered most: Delphine, Laurent, Imani, Octavia, Simone, Hollis, and Tobias. After the ceremony, Jada slipped away to her mother's grave. The headstone was simple: Eleanor Beatrice. She loved fearlessly and built beautifully. Jada knelt beside it, placing fresh flowers. "I did it, Mama. I met all your conditions. Saved the company, stopped the development, built something meaningful. But more than that, I found myself again." She traced her mother's name on the stone. "I'm sorry I wasted so much time. Sorry I chose him over you, but I'm also grateful. Grateful you never gave up on me. Grateful you loved me enough to let me fall, knowing I'd need to hit bottom before I could climb back up." A breeze moved through the cemetery, carrying the scent of flowers Jada had planted. "I'm okay, Mama. Finally, truly okay. Not healed completely. I think that takes a lifetime. But okay enough to live instead of just survive." Walking back to her car, Jada felt lighter. That evening, the mansion filled with celebration. Everyone who'd fought beside her gathered for dinner. Octavia stood to make a toast. To Eleanor Beatrice, who understood that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't protection from pain, but the tools to survive it. And to Jada, who proved her mother right about everything. Later, when guests had left, Jada found Tobias in the library. "When did you stop seeing me as an opponent?" she asked. "The day of Delphine's deposition. I watched you leave because you couldn't bear hearing how much your mother had suffered. That's when I knew. And when did I become more than just a person? When you chose to help Simone. That's when I knew I wanted to be part of your life. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for traditional romance. Then we'll invent new words. We'll figure it out as we go." In the morning, Jada walked through the mansion one more time. Her mother's presence was everywhere, but it no longer made her sad. Instead, it felt like being held. She stood in the design studio and finally understood what the inheritance had really been. Not money, not property. The real inheritance was belief. Her mother's absolute, unwavering belief that Jada was worth saving. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you right," she whispered. "I'm going to help other women find their way back to themselves. I'm going to create beauty and meaning. That's how I honor everything you gave me. She picked up a sketch pad and began drawing, a new collection telling the story of transformation. Outside, the sun rose over gardens her mother had planted, over a neighborhood they'd saved together, over a city slowly learning to protect its history. The light caught the windows of the community center, making it glow like hope made solid. Jada Beatrice sat in her mother's studio, sketching her future, and finally felt at peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because she'd learned to carry it with grace. The inheritance wasn't what she'd lost. It was what she'd found. Herself whole and worthy, stronger for having been broken, ready to live the life her mother had always believed she deserved, ready to be worth it.